So tonight's webinar is on Virginia Beach trees, right place. And I know this is a topic that has been done many times in many ways, and I've tried to be a little tongue-in-cheek in places, so I hope you'll bear with me. If you don't find my humorous, I hope you'll be kind and just bear with me on it. Trees are a very important part of our Virginia Beach landscape, and it is unfortunately a part of the landscape that we do not seem to appreciate at the level that we should. Trees offer us a tremendous number of benefits, and in Virginia Beach especially, they provide us protection from storms. They help us with stormwater runoff, and they help us with absorbing floodwater. And almost every time we have a big storm come through, counterintuitively to the fact that these trees are helping us deal with the storms, they buffer the winds to keep them from beating our houses up. They do so many things for us. Almost every time we have a big storm or hurricane, afterwards, it seems like every neighborhood has this huge number of trees that get cut down. And it's quite tragic that this is going on because those trees really are helping us tremendously. And there are a lot of companies that really take advantage of people's fears dealing with the trees and the storms. Trees can get hurt. Most of the time, all they require is some pruning and some limbing, and they can be just as healthy as they were. They can be damaged, it's true, but that doesn't mean that the whole tree is weakened. And we really need to be putting more trees in, not taking trees out. So I hope that tonight's presentation helps you solve some of the mysteries about where to put some trees and what types of trees are out there to put them in, and helps guide some of your decision making as you move through whether you should get a tree or not get a tree and where you should put those trees. So it's a tree, so just plant it there. If you have a yard, you're just going to plant it there, right? We all live in the same city, so just stick it in a hole in the ground, right? Well, obviously, there's a lot of different kinds of trees, and trees are just like people. They have different needs. We can't just put it there, wherever there may be. While there are a lot of trees that are very forgiving, and some of those trees may be able to survive there's a lot of trees that won't, or if they do survive there, because it wasn't thought through, they may end up being cut down later because the person who put them there realizes later on that it's too big for there, or it's not right for that space, or something. So we really need to take some time and think about where we want to put a tree, and is it the right tree, and is it the right place for that tree, before we start making those kinds of decisions. We need to consider some things. First of all, we need to consider where we live. So for the most part, most of the people I think watching this tonight live in Virginia Beach. We're talking about Virginia Beach trees. So Virginia Beach is one big city. It's a pretty large city, and it stretches from the Chesapeake Bay all the way down to the North Carolina line. And I say it's one city, but it's two regions. And when I say two regions, I say that because it's two distinct watersheds. The top 1/3 of the city is the Chesapeake Bay Watershed. And if you look at the map, you can see that there is a lavender line that divides the yellow and the green, the light green and the dark green, and the yellow. There's a lavender line that goes under those areas. And everything above that line is part of the Chesapeake Bay Watershed. Everything below that line belongs to the southern watersheds. And that's about 2/3 of the city. And that area of the city is made up primarily of the North Landing River watershed and the Albemarle-Pamlico watershed, though there is a small section that is another watershed, but it's primarily those two watersheds. And those two regions, those two larger watersheds, broken down into subwatersheds, have some different characteristics that would require different types of plants. Some things they have in common, but other things can be very different. So the Chesapeake Bay watershed has coastline that's on the ocean. It has coastline that's on the bay. When you get to the Lynnhaven River and part of the Little Creek, you're dealing with estuaries, which are, and they move into tributaries that go inland, and they're saline. The waters are salty. The areas of land around them are suburban. And then arguably, there's some areas that are in those areas like town center and maybe hilltop areas that I would call like urban light. They're not, we don't really have any hard urban areas here, but they're urbanesque, let's say. They're not really urban, but there's a lot of concrete and they're kind of densely populated. So we're going to call them urban light. And then in the southern watersheds, we have the ocean again. We have a bay, but it's a different kind of bay. It's a brackish waters. And instead of having the tidal movement like the Chesapeake Bay watershed does, it's a wind-driven tide. It does have tides, but it's a wind-driven tide, and it's brackish water. It has a river, but it's a freshwater river. It has a lot of rural land and some suburban land. So there's some differences between those two areas of the city of Virginia Beach. Well, it's just a tree. So how hard can it be? Well, let's just say that it's really easy to plant a tree incorrectly. So to tree or not to tree? So here's the wrong way to add a tree to your home. So you're walking through, let's see, I'm not even going to say like Home Depot. We're going to say you're walking through Target. And Target has a stand full of something really cute, and it's a tree, and it's there because it's a holiday season. Let's say it's springtime, and it looks like it gets really pretty flowers, and you really like it, and you buy it because it was $10. You go home and you stick it in a hole somewhere because the dog had already dug part of a hole anyway, so you just had to take a couple shovelfuls out and you had your hole, and then you filled it back in and you cross your fingers and you hope it survived. That is the wrong way to add a tree to your home. First of all, you don't even know what it was. It could have been an invasive plant. It may not be a plant that's even gonna grow here. I mean, they don't guarantee you that. It's really up to you to find out if it's a plant that'll grow here. You just don't know. You don't know what you're getting. And it was very impulsive. It was an impulse buy. So the correct way to add a tree to your home is you see a tree and you like a tree. And you look at the tag on the tree and you read all of its requirements. You see, you know, what kind of light it needs, what kind of space it needs, how big is it going to get, what kind of soil does it need. You go home, you look at your space around your home. Can you give it what it needs? If you can do that, then before you go back and get it, watch a video on how to plant it right. Then go back, buy the tree, come home and plant it, and then enjoy your successes. Now, what if you came home? You had read everything on the tag. You came home and you realized you couldn't give that tree what it needed. What do? You don't buy it. I mean, you're not going to move to find that tree the right place to live. Nobody's going to do that. If you buy it anyway, it's not going to survive, so you're throwing your money away. What you need to do, if you find that you really want a tree, at that point, you need to do some research and find a tree that will thrive in the conditions that you have at your home. And then watch the video on how to properly plant a tree. Go buy a tree that is that tree that will survive at your home. Come home, plant it, and enjoy your success. And watch it grow for years to come. So let's talk some native language, native trees. One of the things that we're going to assume today is that we're all going to speak the native language. Our ecosystem here in Virginia Beach really needs us to make good choices. And when I say we need to make good choices, I mean we need to plant native trees. We need to plant native plants. Our nurseries are chock full of non-native plants. And those plants are not good for our ecosystems. They don't support our insects. They don't support our birds. They don't support our wildlife. And we need them. We need to be planting things that support those things. Native trees are the ones that are going to give us the greatest success in our homes because they're the ones who are meant to be growing here. Where you live is their home as much as it is your home. Native plants are plants that occur naturally where they evolved. And, you know, without directly reading to you what is on the slide, they're the ones that have evolved to support our local wildlife. They tolerate our unique weather, and they will survive for generations and generations. Some of the trees that you find across the landscape in Virginia Beach are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old. They are meant to be here. They grow well and survive here. And as we are losing our forested areas, it becomes more and more important that we as homeowners are providing these natural, you know, putting in as many of these native plants and trees as we can, because there is less and less of them out in nature because there's less and less nature to be found. So we really need to be helping the greater grid of nature by providing them in our gardens and our yards. So what are the basics? This is like filling out a dating profile. So we need to look and see if we have a good fit for the tree. And is the tree a good fit for you? So this is all the things. How tall does the tree get? How wide does the tree get, crown-wise? How big does it get at the top? What's the tree shape look like? What is the leaf shape? Is it dark green? Is it light green? Is it star shaped? Is it oval shaped? What's it look like? What's the flower look like? Do you see it? Or is it tiny and hidden? What does the fruit or the seed look like? What wildlife uses it? What kind of soil type does it need? That's kind of important. You know, does it like acidic oil or soil? I mean, if you have pine trees in your yard, would it be happy with those pine trees? What color is the bark? What texture is the bark? What is the flower color? Can you use it? Edible? Is it edible? For me, I love edible trees. Anything that I can eat off a tree, I love that. I have a fig tree in my backyard and I use every single fig I can get my hands on as they fall. Now, figs are not native, but I use every one that I can get. You know, there's a lot of native plants that are used, you know, herbally, or you use them for decoration as the seasons come and go. So all these different things you need to look at as you try to figure out if the tree is a good fit for you and if your yard is a good fit for that tree. So here's the big questions. But what if my yard is too whatever? So the challenges that we face in the Virginia Beach yard. One of the biggest challenges we have is salty and saline soils and air. So plants don't like salt. Just they don't. They don't like salt. And along the coastline, salt, especially very close to the ocean and the bay, salt tends to build up in the soil, and salt makes it hard for plants' roots to absorb water, and not many plants can make it very easily where there's a lot of salt in the soil. But there are some plants that are adapted in a way that can handle that. So I've highlighted some of the native plants that can deal with that situation. So these plants can live in saline soil. They can handle the soil being salty. Some plants can handle saline spray, but can't handle saline soil. These can handle saline soil. So first we have the live oak, which, you know, everybody loves the live oak. It is a slow growing oak. It has that beautiful stunted form, especially the closer to the ocean that it is. It gets that wind blown, unpredictable growth habit. It's just a wonderful, wonderful plant. And we have a support group in the area, the Friends of Live Oak, who would love to be able to work with you to put live oaks in if that is a tree that interests you. It's a great tree, and you know, it's one that we used to, it was everywhere all along our coastlines, and many of them have been removed. And we really, the more we put in, the better. So that's a great one to consider. The next one is a very underappreciated tree, I think, the eastern red cedar. It is a tree that is, it's everywhere in our landscape in Virginia, really. It's kind of, farmers used to consider them a trash tree, but they really are a hardy tree. They can handle the salt. They have a lot of wildlife value to them. The juniper berries are great for birds. And of course, it's also, you know, juniper berries is where we get gin. So, you know, that's a good thing. Loblolly pine. We wouldn't be Tidewater without loblolly pine. They're beautiful pines, tall and erect, and definitely are part of our coastal landscape. You gotta love those. And the wax myrtle, Morella cerifera, of course, that is the cousin of the bayberry. It is our southern version of the bayberry. It is a thick, almost shrubby. It's almost more shrubby than it is tree-like. And it has a lot of wildlife value, and it's a beautiful screening plant. If you're looking for something like that, and it smells so good. It's so aromatic. It's great to take inside, take some cuttings inside over the holidays. It just smells like winter holidays. So it's a great one, and it does so well in the saline, saline environment. It does a great job. And so do the rest of these plants. So we're not in a shortage of plants, actually, that do well in saline soils. All of the ones in the left list, so serviceberry, or also known as shadbush, does really well in saline soil. Fringe tree does well. Persimmon, magnolia, both the grandiflora, the big southern magnolia, does well in saline soils, as well as the sweet bay magnolia, white oaks and pin oaks and red oaks and live oaks. We saw the live oak on the other page. But I said that not all the trees that do well in the soils do well with the saline spray. And so the right-hand list is a list of the trees that may be able to tolerate the spray but don't tolerate the soil. So they would be good for further inland. So that's the catalpa, hackberry, the green ash, or the swamp ash as it's known, American holly, sweet gum, black gum, longleaf pine, black cherry, willow oak, and the bald cypress. So if you live in a site that has some salt issues, you do have some choices when it comes to trees. It's just a matter of figuring out what tree is the best tree for your site. And then as we move in, inland some, there's some other things that do well on dunes and along sandy edges. And some of those are some of the same trees that we just talked about, because here's our friend, again, the eastern red cedar, and our friend, the shadbush or serviceberry, as it's known, which is a beautiful, beautiful understory tree. The flowers on the shadbush are just glorious. And on the right side is the persimmon, which has beautiful fall color. And then our friend the live oak again, our friend the bald cypress again, the loblolly again, and the black cherry. So a lot of the same plants that could handle some of were soil tolerant or salt spray tolerant are also good for dunes and sandy edges. As we move in to Virginia Beach from the coastal edges, we start getting into our suburban areas and our urban areas. We come into some areas that might have small lots like townhomes or condos, some of those. And some of those places may have a tiny little place that they want to put some trees, but trees tend to be bigger. But there are some choices for smaller places. Trees aren't all huge, 110-foot giants. There are some options for some smaller trees. One of my favorites is the Yopon holly, Ilex vomitoria. I have to, full disclosure, you can't not love a tree that has vomitoria in the name. But it's, regardless of the name, it's a wonderful plant. The trees The berries are used, or the leaves are used for a strong tea, and it won't make you vomit, I promise. But it's a strong tea, and you can actually get it locally. But and then the other one that's a beautiful, beautiful, small, very delicate looking tree with green, it has a green trunk and green twigs, is the Euonymus americanus, which is the hearts of Buston or the strawberry bush. It has really unique little seed pods, as you can see in the picture. It's just, there's really nothing else like it out there. Some of the other choices for small lots are like the Redbud, witch hazel, which is really one of my very favorite trees. It's a deciduous tree that is, gets these strappy yellow flowers, but the strappy yellow flowers don't bloom until November or October. And usually they don't bloom until the leaves have fallen off of the tree. So it's really kind of striking. It's quite a wonderful tree. So once you move away from those small lots and you come into the suburbs and you get to some bigger lots, some of the challenging spots might be along the street edges. These are areas that are, compressed. A lot of our lots in Virginia Beach, when they came in to build them, they really just scraped all of the topsoil off of our properties, built the houses, threw some topsoil back down, threw down some seed, and put in, I don't know, that just sort of cut and pasted a landscape on top of all of our homes. And our ground is very much clay and compacted soil and not very good and not very healthy and happy. So some of the trees that do well to help break up the soil and can beat its way through some of that are things like the fringe tree. Again, our ubiquitous eastern red cedar, the red maple, Acre rubrum. So those are things that have good, strong roots that can push its way through those compacted soils and move through and spread out and help break up that packed, awful dirt. As we move towards the southern watersheds, we start getting into some swampy, wet, and sunny locations. So when I start to think about what can go into areas like that, we start to look at things like the pawpaw, which is Asamina triloba, and we think about the green ash or the swamp ash, Fraxinus pennsylvanica, I'm sorry. And again, and then we have the willow oak, Quercus felix. Each of these are plants that we say don't mind getting their feet wet. They don't mind having their roots submerged. They can handle having water surrounding their roots. And plants, when they have water surrounding their roots for a long time, aren't able to take oxygen up through their roots. So they have to take oxygen in through their leaves and kind of force it down into their roots from the top of the tree. But they are able to do that fairly easily. So these are just a couple of the plants that the trees that are able to do that. Pawpaw, of course, are sort of communal plants, and they will get suckers and start to build a community if you allow them to. if you put them in a place where you don't mind them doing that, you'll get a grove in no time, or a pawpaw patch, as the song says. I pulled out a few plants in particular as we start to get into swampy, wet, and shady plants, because some of the plants through here are just some of the most striking plants. They're just beautiful, and I just wanted to highlight them a little bit. The first one I pulled out is the Eastern Redbud, circanidensis. It's just a lovely tree. It gets beautiful, striking pink, purplish blossoms all over in the spring before it leaves out, which makes it a very popular tree. It doesn't get very big. It's a small tree, and it has these very cute heart-shaped leaves that it gets after the blossoms are done. And then when it starts to turn, those leaves become a purplish color. So I just wanted to show you the blossoms and the leaves and show you what a pretty tree that is. It can handle being wet and shaded. It doesn't mind having its feet wet. It handles those sorts of situations well. So a good showy plant to put in a situation like that. And you'll notice some of the plants as we've moved through this, you'll have seen several of these plants now on several different lists. So some of these plants are very versatile. You know, you can put them in many different places and they will thrive. And that's the joy of these native plants. They won't be put in a box. They can survive and do more than just survive, thrive in many different situations. You just have to, you know, make sure that you understand what they can do and where they can do it. The other one I pulled out, you've already met, is a persimmon. Persimmon is a fruit tree. It has that beautiful fall color. I mean, it's really striking, that orange. It's just amazing. It has a beautiful petite little white flower, and it gets a beautiful fruit. And I wanted to show you guys that there's many things that you can do with that persimmon. There's preserves up there and cookies and cakes and breads that someone who has found the joy of baking with natural fruits has done. So if you get a persimmon tree, you better heat up the oven.
They are delicious.
They are.
I've noticed too, walking around Foster Cape, you also find a lot of persimmon trees around there. So if you're ever out exploring that area
and need a snack, there you go. And then the other tree I've pulled out for the swampy, wet, and shady is the sweet Bay Magnolia. And this is a beautiful little tree. You know, when you think of magnolias, I think everybody thinks of Magnolia grandiflora, the southern magnolia, and it's that big, huge matriarch of trees that gets the big, huge flowers, and you know, and you can smell it before you see it when you're walking. And it's just glorious. But this is a lovely smaller tree, and it gets beautiful smaller flowers, and you know, it has all of the nice traits of a magnolia tree, but in a smaller, more diminutive fashion. And its leaves are not quite as heavy and leathery, and definitely not furry like grandiflora is. And it's very nice as a part of a home landscape.
Helen, I hate to interrupt, but also the root system for the magnolia that's not, you know, native to this area, that will take over other trees and often be very dominant. So I do like this as another option.
Yes. All right, and again, like with the salty trees, there is no shortage of trees that can handle wet, swampy areas. There is so much available out there that can handle getting their feet wet. And it's really kind of amazing because when trees are in water, it really is very hard for them because trees are getting their nutrients and a lot of their oxygen through their roots. And so when trees' roots are in water, they can't do that. They're not taking in the nutrients and the oxygen through their roots anymore. The roots are pretty much just trying to stabilize them, and they're having to do those things in other ways. So the adaptation that trees have to be able to shift to a different way of, you know, gaining their oxygen and gaining their nutrients is really quite interesting. But there are a lot of trees that can do this, and trees that end up being in the water for a long time end up adapting to that situation by doing other things, like they develop buttresses. If you've ever seen swamps, you notice that the bottom of trees start to look like they have flanges at the bottom. The bases start to broaden, and some of them actually get like ridges at the bottom where they flange out. And those are the trees' adaptations to help stabilize them in the wet, unstable, wet environment. And also it gives their trunk more surface area to try to help them gain more oxygen through the surface area, since they're not able to gain that oxygen through their roots. So it's really some of the adaptations that trees have that they develop when they're flooded is really kind of interesting. And I put this one in special because it's one of my favorites, and I realized it had been left off of that tremendous list, so I wanted to put it in. But this is the tulip poplar, Liriodendron tulipifera. It's a beautiful, beautiful tree, very tall, and the flowers are very just lovely. Cup-shaped flowers and large, fairly large flowers. You can hold one in your hand. If you put your two hands together, you can hold one. And they're just quite lovely when you find them in the woods in the springtime. All right, just some other situations. If you live, you know, you have farm fields and you just want something to plant against wooded edges, some of the sub trees that would be good in those situations are things like dogwood, the American holly, and again, our friend the pawpaw, some of those smaller trees. And then another category of trees that might be of interest are trees that are a bit deer resistant. This is something that also might be interesting to some of our friends in the southern watershed. You can look up trees that are deer resistant, and there are a few, believe it or not. And again, our ubiquitous friend, the eastern red cedar, it seems like even though they were considered trash trees, they seem to be the answer to everything. I think that's just one of those trees that if that's the only tree, I think, that you can just get it and dig a hole and put it wherever and it'll do it. It'll be okay. But our friend, the green ash or the swamp ash, Deer seem not to like those. They don't really like river birch. They don't like the eastern redbuds. And they don't like our friend, the eastern red cedar. But wait, there's more. There's a couple more challenges that we want to think about. First of all, misutility. You need to make sure that you call 811 at least 3 business days before you dig, or visit Virginia811.com. There will be a test. 811. That's what you have to remember. Visit Virginia811.com. Utility lines. It's a special kind of problem. But Dominion Energy has the solution. They have an easement around all of their utility lines. So you just have to stay away from them. If they have underground utility lines, they have a 15-foot easement. That means 7.5-foot easement on each side of the line. So you can't plant anything within that. If you have anything that grows into that easement, either you cut it back or they will. If you plant something in that easement, they are going to cut it down to the ground. Above ground, they have a 30-foot easement. Same thing. If it grows inside that boundary, they're going to cut it to the ground. If you have something that grows over into that easement, they're going to cut it back to that boundary. So just be aware. If you are trying to plant a tree to shade your home, this is sort of a special consideration. You need to make sure that you are planting close enough to the house that you are going to get the benefit of the tree, but not so close to the house that you're going to have a problem with the tree. So most houses that plant to shade the home, first of all, you want to use a deciduous tree because you want the tree to lose its leaves in the winter so you get the winter sun on the house to warm the house. But you have the leaves in the summer to shade the house. You want to plant at the southwest corner of the home. And then depending on the height of the tree at maturity is how close to the house that you want to plant the tree. There are some trees you don't want to use. You don't want to use willows or poplars because they have a tendency to grow into water pipes. And you don't want to use them anywhere close to water pipes. So whether you're planting them, you were considering using them for shading your house, or you have your water pipe, you know where your water pipes are on your property. Don't put those trees anywhere close to your water pipes or close to your home. So resources. Please be careful who you take advice from. Don't believe wool is the answer if the shepherd offers the advice. Okay, I was getting kind of punchy when I made that one up. Here are some of the resources that I used to put this together. We are recording this, right, Emily? We're recording
Yes,
this.
we are recording. Also in the chat box, so one of the resources you have listed, Helen, which is a great resource we often refer to, the Native Plants for Southeast Virginia.
Yeah.
If you guys see in the chat box, there's a direct link to this, and if you go to page 44, it talks about directly about trees and the right planting space for it. So I'm gonna send that link to you guys right now.
Okay, great. Great. So these are some of the resources that I used. There's a lot of information on the Virginia Cooperative Extension, trees and shrubs that tolerate saline and salt spray drift. So if that is an issue that you're dealing with, you may want to look at that. It is online and easy to find. So I do recommend that one. But all of these are very good resources, and there's a lot more, but please do look at who is putting it out. And one of the things I want to make sure that as you're delving into the tree situation, please make sure that when you are talking to somebody about trees, make sure that you are talking to an arborist when you're talking to somebody about trees. There's a difference between somebody who makes a living cutting down trees and somebody who works on trees. Not all trees have to be cut down to be cared for. There is a lot of things that can be done between taking care of a tree and cutting down a tree. And we have got to protect our trees. We can't be cutting them all down like that has been the trend. We are losing a huge benefit with a sea level rise coming. I mean, it's happening, and it's affecting the southern watersheds much more quickly than it is the Chesapeake Bay Watershed, but it's affecting the Chesapeake Bay Watershed too. Trees are critical in the answer to dealing with recurrent flooding and flooding from sea level rise. So we've got to hold on to our trees, and we've got to put more in. So we really need everybody out there taking care of their trees. So if you have any questions, we'd be happy to talk to you about them. Or, you know, if I don't have the answers, I can email you back with the answers. If you had a chance to fill out the poll, or if you want to fill out the poll now, is it still open, Emily?
I just started sharing the poll results.
Oh,
so
okay.
the top 3 of the most important benefits that were chosen were protection from wind and storms, erosion control, and soil stabilization, and make oxygen.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, I think making oxygen is a pretty important. That's pretty important.
Great.
And erosion control is very important. And so is protection from the wind of storms, which is really interesting that was chosen. I think that's hugely important, but that's also one of the reasons that people cut trees down after hurricanes, because they're afraid that the trees are going to come down. So just interesting. Well, those of you who joined us tonight, thank you so much. We really appreciated you spending some time with us this evening, and I hope that you were able to get some ideas about some trees tonight, and I hope you will join us for some more tree-related activities during our Celebrates Trees. Thanks.
Thank you all very much. Have a good evening. Thanks, Helen. Good night.
Thanks, Em.